Less than 60 days until week 0, until we can commence with the outrage over pass interference. Would you settle for tortious interference? And also big questions about some teams that are presumed to at least start in the top 10 that might keep them from finishing there. This is the College Game Day podcast. We are recording on June 24th for release on the 25th. Hope you got it first thing in the morning, wherever you prefer to get your podcast, subscribe or download. Rece Davis here. Pete Thamel is taking some time away, though I'm sure the phone is pressed to his ear. He is ready to break the latest graduate assistant headed to the MAC in a supervisory or supporting role, I'm sure. And we kid because we love Pete. And sitting in is the great Dan Wetzel, who we hope to be able to hear more from over the course of this college football season after joining ESPN in the investigative team and continuing to churn out the great work that he has for years. Dan, we were talking before we started recording, other than shaking hands and passing maybe at the national championship game, this is our first conversation, a real conversation that we're getting to share here on the podcast. It's a delight to have you with us.
I feel the audience is so privileged to get get into that. Should be great. That's great. I'm excited. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So
we got rid of Pete. We got rid of Pete. So, I mean, the show's already 10% better. No, we'll see. We'll see how.
You know, the one thing, before we start with Wisconsin, Miami, tortious interference, Xavier Lucas, all of that, I was thinking when you agreed to come on today and do the podcast, I started thinking about the terrific book that you wrote, Death to the BCS, and the criticism of the computer formulas and all that thing that was part of the BCS formula that drew so much criticism that ultimately helped lead to the playoff. And now here we are looking for a new playoff formula. And after we got the committee in the aftermath of the BCS, all I'm hearing is now, we need some more objective measures to try to take the subjectivity out of evaluating these teams. What irony have you found as a guy who is so in depth with the BCS, the computers, and now this move to maybe we need to use something more objective rather than subjective to evaluate teams?
They all of a sudden love science, math. Yes, I always used to say college football isn't really big on the college part. They weren't into that book learning when it came to the old BCS formula. Now, in fairness, those formulas were a little sketch. I mean, we had one guy, they weren't really mathematicians, and one guy included recruiting rankings, which actually might be predictive. It's actually quite predictive, but how do you, are we quantifying this off of some kid's performance at the rivals camp when he's 16? Where are we going with all this? So those were not good, but yeah, they are now hollering about this. I actually am not opposed to a computer formula. I just cannot imagine in the cultural comfortability of college football coaches that they could possibly accept numerics. They do it in other college sports, particularly hockey, which I could describe, but it's other sports use formulas. I cannot imagine how this would work if, in college football.
Okay, there were. I'm having to refresh my memory just to be honest about it. There were a half dozen computer systems. Kali Matrix was the best name. What was the best formula in the old BCS and the worst? Did you? So let me ask you this: did you dive into? Do you have the expertise or have access to the expertise to dive in to know which ones were significantly flawed and which ones were pretty accurate?
So I'd have to go back and do my research. We also had Jeff Passan, our our colleague on baseball. He helped me write that book. I think he did the chapter where he talked to all the computer gurus. The interesting part, again, was that most of them were just, God bless them, they were just fans who would sit around and try to quantify how someone could win. And it was really the basis of it. We also talked to Nate Silver, who did the 538. He was a big political pollster and kind of, I don't know, whatever that would be. And he mocked them. So I'd have to go back and really look at all the details. I don't recall one being particularly worse than the others, nor were they actually worse than some of the voters. We had one year there were voters and a few forgot to vote in the final poll. The year Utah went, when they had Urban Meyer and Alex Smith, they went undefeated. We called up some of them, and then they went and beat Alabama in a bowl game. When bowl games, you'd get a pretty good effort. And a bunch of them were like, yeah, it's the first time I saw Utah all year. They look good. You're like, how are you a voter and you never saw Utah, right? Like, well, they're playing late. Stay up. So there were so many flaws to that system, but the chaos was just a feature. And we're like, how'd you guys come up with these computer formulas? And they're basically, it wasn't like, well, we analyzed 100 of them and took the 6 most accurate. It was that guy wrote me. And we were like, sure, we'll use your thing. That was really the chaotic. What people were right. They weren't even computers. Some of them were doing hand calculations. Again, recruiting rankings were in there, which I actually agree with, but we're not. There's just no way you're trusting those exactly. There were so many different things. You were better off losing. You're better off losing 70-0 to Alabama than beating somebody else 70-0. It was just so many different things. So you really need one public formula. You need one public formula. I know this too. One guy based it on, he went back and he was a big Minnesota football fan, and he went back and calculated how Minnesota won 3 titles in the 30s and based his formula off of that, which, I don't know the relevance of what Minnesota, bless the Gophers of the 30s. But I don't really think they're one of the greatest teams of all time, or, how that dealt with the Miami Hurricanes of the 2000s, very dissimilar. So there was so many different things, but if there was one computer formula publicly known and agreed upon, it probably would be better. Like I said, in hockey, college hockey has this thing called pairwise, and they use it. Now, hockey has more games and fewer teams. So there's a little bit more of a crossover on data. But at the end of a game, people will say, Boston College just moved up to 4. Oh, Ohio State dropped to 9. They lost. And you know exactly what's happening at all times in real time based on this pairwise system. There's a lot of football powers that also play hockey. They're fine with hockey. But when it comes to football, you start mentioning math, and there's a straight rejection.
The thing about the BCS to me, and I'm going to tie this into what we might do in the future, is that with a few exceptions that you mentioned and some that didn't give opportunity because there were only 2 teams in the championship game, you're splitting hairs over the years that you quibbled with them for the most part. I guess, probably the Florida State Miami year and Miami won head-to-head would be most notable. But the biggest flaw in the BCS system to me was that they kept trying to adjust the formula and retrofit it. Say here, we will never let this happen again. See that we fixed it, but it's an unexpected set of circumstances that were also unlikely to repeat. And they kept trying to fit the formula going backwards, and that undermined the fans and the public trust in it. This is not as difficult as it seems. There are seasons where there is not a correct answer. There is a less objectionable answer. Last year is a perfect example, even among the committee, to me, that you got a less objectionable answer in taking SMU and, to a lesser degree, I guess, Indiana over the SEC teams or Miami. That was, in my judgment, that was not as objectionable as taking those teams from the SEC or Miami who had done something disqualifying. And I said that to say I agree with you. I would like to see, I have more faith in the committee than a lot of people do. They watch the game. That drives me insane. Hey, you really think Gary Pinkel is just going to randomly select these teams without evaluation? Come on. I don't like the notion that fans come up with sometimes, basically, and candidly, not just fans, us too, media people. Your judgment of the situation is not what my judgment is. Therefore, you are biased. It sounds a lot like political discourse, but it's very much like our college football discourse. You may not agree with it, but they come up with an answer, and by and large, it's been defendable, at least in my judgment. But I would not be opposed at all to FPI, Connolly's SP Plus, Sagra, whatever it might be that they decide to use. and assign a certain percentage of that to the evaluation. And the rest of it is the committee rankings, and whatever that is agreed upon is the way that the teams are ranked for the college football playoff. I would not oppose that in any way, shape, form, or fashion. But the one thing I would say is when they do it, get ahead of it and say, this is the best we can do, and it's not foolproof. This is the most fair, the most reasonable path that we can take to rank these teams. There will be years where there will be controversy because of some result that you can't foresee right now, some quirk in the schedule strength, this or that. But overall, long-term, big picture, this is the best way, and stick with it. Now, I'm not saying never deviate if something is obviously awful. They find out that, hey, that guy snuck into this computer formula something about Minnesota from the 30s. If you find that out, of course you fix it. But by and large, don't try to quell the public outrage every time they don't like the result. If they do implement something more objective, that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I agree with you. I thought the reaction to the committee this year was not fair. First off, the problem with the BCS was it was too small. It was 2 teams.
Right. Yeah.
Once you get, and you know this, and anybody who's ever tried to rank anything, it's easy to rank things at the top. It's easy to say, let's just take it out of college. I think Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL. And someone says, I think it's Josh Allen, or I think it's Lamar Jackson. Well, you can get to number 17. Get to number 18. Get to number 9. You're going, I don't know. I have no idea. So once you move past the obvious that you would have had, it gets really complicated. You need somebody to make a call. Last year, the call was, do you take Alabama or you take SMU? Take Alabama or you take Indiana? And they all had compelling cases. Each one had a compelling case. Someone's got to sit there and say, all right, this is what we're going with. You know what? They all made mistakes. Yeah. Someone's got to do it. Because we have 134 teams playing 12 games and trying to compete last year for 12 spots. And so I thought the reaction was wrong. I thought the easier solution is, the one thing that concerned me about that committee was that they basically said a lot of it was done after the regular season and you have the championship game. I think that
I was shocked when I got that answer on the show that night. In fact, even pushed back to make sure that was what Ward had intended to say.
I remember that.
You always want to be fair to someone, and live in the moment, maybe they say something that's not precisely what they meant. So, and clearly it was.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't know that they should really even be ranking every week. They should just do it one at the end. They shouldn't talk, or I mean, but it's part of the whole thing. But when you say that, you go, wait a minute. I'd rather just there's a holistic view at the end, and you say, okay, what do we have? And they're supposed to blow them up each week, maybe. I don't know. There's a million protocols, but somebody's got to make a call on 12 and 13, and someone's going to have to make a call on 16, 17. I thought the reaction was over the top. I did not think this was egregious. We did not leave out, look, if the committee comes out and they just forget to put Oregon in last year, what are we doing, right? That wasn't the case. So you can sit there and say this or this or this, but you've covered college athletics a long time. I've covered college athletics. The number one thing, coaches' favorite things to do is preach that you should overcome adversity, and then they complain about adversity. Yeah, they are the biggest pack of complainers in the history. They whine, they cry, oh my God, we're getting cheated. They don't really understand the formula. I mean, I think it was Kirby Smart. I don't want to pick on which guy, and they all do it, so I don't want to just cite out Kirby, but it was like we need more coaches that understand the SEC on the committee. Like, okay, the 4 coaches we had and the 4 players, counting Ward Manuel, played at Michigan, but was also the AD. They don't know enough ball. Okay, like we have to make sure there's an SEC guy on there. Like, it's turning into this committee's already too big. Somebody's got to sit around and make a call. Play ball. You're in, you're not in. This is going to go, whether you hear it in the men's basketball. There's 68 teams and someone's whining. And they just had a conference tournament where every team had a chance to play their way in. So there's really, the NCAA March Madness is really like 360 teams large because everybody can play. You can lose every game in most leagues, get in, and then just keep winning. You win the national title. So there's so many options. They complain. What is this? They can't control it. They complain about what they can't control, and they are paranoid beyond belief. I thought Greg Sankey had an interesting line about the Deloitte and the whole new NIL rules. And he said, you can't sit in this committee and say you want rules and then immediately in board meetings or coaches meetings say, we want rules. And we give you rules and go out and say, yeah, we're not going to follow it. No one's following it. This is garbage. There should be a little bit of like, hey, this is the system we accept. But that's not very few coaches are going to do that.
You know, Dan, I brought this up on the podcast last week. I think that's all I've heard. Coaches, administrators, just give us the rules and we'll follow them. Well, history in this sport says that that's not true. No. And I don't even, I'm not going to absolve anyone who's broken rules, but I understand where it comes from. Because there is a fundamental lack of trust. I used Pete as an example. He was on here. I said, I'm coaching against Pete, and I like Pete. He's a good guy. Families know each other, but I'm at school A, he's at school B. I don't know for sure that Pete's not going to bend the rule. And if Pete bends a rule and gets the recruit that I have to get and I don't get him, then I'm going to lose, and I'm going to lose my job and lose my livelihood, and therefore it becomes this a vicious cycle of lack of trust. And I mean, look, we can go all high-minded and moral rectitude and say, this is, an absence of character and all of that. But these guys are fighting for survival. Doesn't make it right, but it explains why they think the way they think is because, look, I'm willing to follow the rules, but I don't know if they are. And if they aren't, and I don't, then I'm not getting enough players and we're going to lose and I'm getting fired. And now all of a sudden, I'm fixing air conditioners in 95-degree weather if there were anybody who actually showed up to your house after selling you service contracts to fix your air conditioners to actually do that.
Just a random example you just throw out there?
Just a random example.
Yeah, just hypothetical.
Apropos of nothing, I don't know where that would have come from, when you try to get your ducks to work and they don't. And, it's very frustrating anyway. But, the fundamental lack of trust there is an issue. So I don't,
it's a zero-sum business. And this is, this in the NFL to me and all major sports, it's a highly competitive business, but it's zero sum. And as competitive as say they are on Wall Street in finance, right? These are obviously cutthroat stuff. Just because an investment bank, Morgan Stanley does well today does not mean that Merrill Lynch did poorly. Mm-hmm. The pie can expand. There is a finite number of victories here. And so I win, you lose. Other businesses, we can both win. And we may win a little bit more. But you think about all of the fraud, the deception, the intensity of high stress business, real estate, these things. It's still not football where we're down. I got 12 shots here. I got 12 games. Or I'm in the NFL. I got 17 games. And I have to pour everything into winning that game. I win, you lose, you win, I lose. That changes the dynamic even more. And we see, obviously, all this type of stuff. If something matters, people are going to find if you're going on vacation this summer to the beach and you want to get a quick nap in, download the NCAA manual. Read section 15.1.3.1.2, whatever. You will see every rule imaginable in there, and you'll fall asleep really quickly. But for some reason, they had to put that rule in because nobody thought that someone would do this. So we now have to counter to that. So this is the sport. They're extremely competitive. They're on edge. They're angry. They're paranoid. No one's ever lost a recruit. Right? No one's ever lost a recruit. They didn't just choose stolen. Yeah, How could someone possibly choose to play football at that place? Well, it's pretty good over there. I don't know. Everybody cheated. Everybody. It's a feature of the sport. It's not a bug, in my opinion. I love it. I think it drives the sheer insanity that gives us a living and gives us a lifetime of enjoyment. And I'm sure everybody on here, the enjoyment. I always find the scandals as part of the fun, not something to be, at least the harmless ones, are pretty fun.
If we had this system, Dan, that everybody followed all of the rules precisely and were bastions of virtue, I think a lot of fans would get bored because a lot of what they enjoy doing is sniping at one another over these things. And I'm sure there's plenty of that going on between Wisconsin and Miami. This case, and I'm sure most are familiar with Xavier Lucas. He's a native of the state of Florida. He'd gone to Wisconsin. He'd signed an NIL deal, a revenue sharing type deal. And then Wisconsin has now sued Miami, though not Lucas directly, as I understand it, for tortious interference, that they tampered basically with him. This at least seems like it has the potential. It could be a nothing burger. It could also be a bit of a landmark moment, depending on how this goes from here. How do you see it?
Yeah, I think it could be. I agree with you. It could be both. First off, I mean, I love it. Okay, we have one school suing the other. Wisconsin sues Miami in Dane County Circuit Court. They didn't go federal on this. Dane County Circuit Court, which is the county of Madison. They're going for the home game against the Hurricanes. Jury trial. Stack the odds. I think they played jump around before the closing arguments in Dane County Circuit Court. So I'm guessing there will be a venue complaint return from Miami, looking that we do not have standing in Dane County. So I don't know how serious this thing is. I read it. I actually think Wisconsin's probably their issue is with the player, not with Miami. But at issue here is, again, I'm sure you're familiar with it, Rece, Rule 13.1.1.3.
Just reading it last night.
Yeah, just going through it. Yeah. But, any athletic staff member or other representative of institution's athletic interest shall not communicate or make contact with the student athlete of another NCAA Division I institution or any individual associate, blah, blah, blah. Based on the facts presented by Wisconsin, Miami certainly broke that rule. Now, that's an NCAA rule. Is this really tortious interference? I don't know. What is an NIL contract worth? What what is tampering? That's really the issue. And this is where coaches are up in arms about tampering. And I understand why they are up in arms about tampering. They would hate it, but without making the players employees, it's very hard to do this. I really feel like even in the NFL, which we've not seen teams sue each other yet, they have strict tampering rules, but it's almost unenforceable, right? It's, Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay just happened to show up at the exact same vacation resort in Mexico. And then Matthew said he wanted to go play for the Rams. Just a totally hard, just total coincidental. Maybe it was, maybe it was. How do you do this? How do you now, Miami's accused of having a sit down meeting with a coach and a booster that is against 13.1.1.3 in my judicial opinion. But does that really merit a lawsuit? And what is the monetary damages? What are we trying to get out of it? You can't make a kid go to school somewhere. So I think there's a lot of issues here with the tampering.
That's probably been the thing that has swayed me toward, though I wouldn't say I'm completely there with players being employees. I think the only answer to this is collective bargaining. Okay, if you're going to collective bargaining, almost by definition, then the players have to be employees, or else with whom are you going to bargain? Who's going to represent each side? I understand both sides of this, but the biggest thing about the portal and the up in arms over that is if you're not going to call them employees, if these are not going to be binding pay-for-play contracts, then what business do you have telling someone where they can go to school and where they can play? NIL and being compensated for it, whether you want to call it pay-for-play or not, does change that a little bit in my judgment in terms of, building a framework around which guys can move around so that you don't have unrestricted free agency throughout the calendar year all the time. So I don't know that there's any way out of it beside this. I do think that, Wisconsin's trying to draw a line in the sand, and you're probably right. The issue is with the player, but it is a much better look to go after the institution that you're upset with, as opposed to going after the player and then having all of the people representing those players, whether in the portal or coming out of high school, say, you really want to go there where they sue their players? So right. It's a difficult thing, but I understand where Wisconsin's coming from. You sign a deal with somebody, there should be some expectation to live up to it. I do know that there are some schools that have within the NIL deals that they have with their players now, say schools, entities, collectives, whoever it is that actually signs the other side, that basically have clawback provisions in there that if, within the rules, I guess you can leave, but if you do, here's what you're going to owe. And I think that has functioned in some cases to keep guys from moving, because then you do the math. I guess, I don't know if there was any clawback, but the Iamaleavas clearly didn't do all of the gaming out with tax implications and less salary and all of that.
Yeah, and that's fine. I think
I agree with that.
I'm a believer in there are many ways, and this is one of them. We don't need a bunch of NCAA rules or new rules with this new organization. There are rules. It's called the court system, and you can attempt this to go. Again, I don't see how. My guess is that a judge will look and say, just because your association has some rules, how is that applicable to the actual law? Again, in Wisconsin, I don't know that this thing stays in Wisconsin. I don't know how you have this suit in Dane County, but again, that's why I'm not sure how serious it really is or how much we're going to stand up for ourselves. It does appear, again, as the laying of the facts as Wisconsin has done. We've not seen Miami's response. This is pretty egregious tampering. But the violation here is a contract between a player and a school. And so did the player break that contract? And if there is a contract and it says, hey, you owe us the money back, or there's a penalty or whatever, that's totally fine. Players over 18, these are adults making contractual arrangements, and you get your redress that way. What you don't do is count on these nebulous rules. What coaches hate is tampering, and I get it. And you hear all this stuff. The guy in my layup line said, "Hey, man, you're great. You should come play for us," or sitting down or meeting. But it can be anything. I mean, if you're a recruiter and you recruit, some powerhouse, Miami Northwestern, right? You're down there every year, and you lose. A Xavier goes somewhere else that you wanted, just using Xavier as a name. And you say, hey, you talking to the head coach, hey, how's Xavier doing up there? Notice he didn't get a lot of playing time. Boy, he would have been good for us. Boy, I always wanted to coach that. Is that tampering? All of life is tampering. People saying, hey, you should come work for me. Hey, if you ever break up with that guy, I'm over here, whatever. All of life is tampering, right? You like this brand of a soda? This is the one you should look at our commercial. So how in the world do you try to police this, particularly when you're the NCAA? So I think everything should be contractual. And I just think Wisconsin's realistically suing the wrong person here, but they're trying to make a point. They're trying to stand up for themselves. I get it. It's not fun losing your player. This is just college sports doesn't make any sense when you get into the law. And that's what's befuddled these federal judges and even the Supreme Court. If you read the Supreme Court decisions on college sports, their mind is kind of blown. Nobody in their right mind thinks that having two transfer portals is a good idea, right?
Yeah.
No, I mean, come on, right? One, okay. Two, this is crazy. Oh, I had a good practice. Now I'm back in. This is not the way you run a sport. That said, how do you tell someone, no, you must go to school at this school? You can't. And that's and how do you say you can't go take this money? There's a Sherman Antitrust Act. So they have so many, we're trying to jam a square peg into as much of the round hole as we can, and or as much of the peg into the hole as we can, and that's where it all becomes undone. So I'll be interested to see if this thing goes anywhere, but I don't think Miami's too scared. They're not getting locked up. They're not going to prison on this one. It's maybe like a one game suspension for the coach. Like I've looked at some of the other cases. There's one at I forget. It was like Northern Colorado. I don't want to say this. Some Division II out in the Mount Rockies, and I mean it was pretty egregious tampering, and the guy got a 1-game suspension.
1-game suspension is not even as much as the Coastal Carolina baseball coach is getting for that ridiculous ump show thing in the College World Series against LSU. And look, LSU was a better team, deserved to win and all of that. But, I mean, this cat, apparently, I can't call his name off the top of my head. You just made me think of it. But he ejected somebody in a super regional for basically nothing, a player last year. He's got to go, man. You know, unless his ball strike percentage, according to TrackMan, is like 99.9, then he needs some behavioral therapy. That guy's got to go. Whoever that ump is, he can't be in big spots like that anymore. But, you know, so we cover all of the bases here on
I agree. I have a ton of respect for referees that put themselves in especially at the youth level and high school level. They're not making any money, but you're at the College World Series. You're as close to a professional at this as you can get, and nobody's there to see the refs. I get it. The rule says, you know, you can't argue balls and strikes. It's ejectable, but you know. Time and place, man. Time and place.
I mean, and the other thing too is like
can't go 31 and a 30 either.
And he gets the warning, and he says, goes out to clarify what the warning was about, and so in the heat of the moment says, "Well, you've missed 3 pitches," and you know, until you go back and look at the tape, you don't even know what he said. Yeah, come on, man. I mean,
it's the first inning of the big game. It's just,
come on, dude.
Nobody is there to see the referees. Referees never want to determine the outcome of a game. It's what they're terrified of.
Yeah,
right. They you know, they're so happy when they just get through it. Everyone's good. Nobody talks about the refs. That's what you want. What you don't want is this, and it's not fair to LSU. You know, they win the championship, and everyone's talking about Coastal Carolina coach getting thrown out in the first inning, and it's like. The whole thing goes haywire.
And the other thing was the ump. He just fell. Nobody knocked him down. Nobody pushed. He tripped. It's embarrassing. You hate to see it. Well, actually, you don't. I didn't mind it. I thought it was rather amusing. But at any rate, you know, they'll probably rescind that. But
I mean, that was I've covered a lot of Olympic gymnastics during my career. That was a Simone Biles tumble. That was a pretty good there. I don't know what that was all about. And now, on a side note, is there anyone in America angrier than and more intense than college baseball coaches? I mean, good Lord, with these people. I mean, the shades, the chomping on the tobacco, the hat pulled down. If you're if you're down at the convenience store and a guy like that walks in, you get nervous. These guys.
I've got extensive experience with college baseball coaches. My son played a couple places. I'll tell you a quick story, and I hope New Virginia coach Chris Pollard doesn't get upset with me for revealing this story. So I don't remember who we were playing when Pollard was at Duke and my son was playing, and my son has a strike called on him, not a strike 3, mid at bat, right? Yep. We get offensive timeout, and here comes 14 out of the dugout. And you can tell he's furious, right? He's got his arm around my son, and he's furious. It looks like he's letting my son have it. Looks like it. And my wife says, "What?" And I'd been made aware of this tactic that he had. And my wife said, "What?" My son's name is also Christopher, and she said, "What's he mad at Christopher about?" I said, "Nothing." I said, "He is absolutely eviscerating the umpire without arguing balls and strikes and without getting thrown out, but making the point that he didn't like, not just that call, but there were like a series of calls that he wasn't thrilled with, that he's making his point that we need behind the
sort of like he's coaching him up
together.
Like, don't get upset because the umpire is terrible, and don't, let me just this is a teachable moment for you, son. Right. Christopher,
exactly.
Way to stand in there and keep your composure when the umpire is awful, right? What was that? Was it Billy Tubbs when they were throwing stuff on the court at Oklahoma, and he got on the mic and said, "No throwing stuff on the court, no matter how bad the referees are," right?
Yeah.
Exactly. I think it was a little of that. Yeah. I don't know. College baseball coaches are they're fantastic. Like, what a great job you have. You guys are all, these guys should be on an automatic watch list. College baseball coach. Why are you guys all so angry all the time? They march around. Digger
Phelps, and I'm going to clean this up a little bit. Digger Phelps and I still remain very close, but Digger told me a story one time. I think they were a big game against San Francisco back when San Francisco was a big power. Ball goes out of bounds, and he said it's right in front of our bench, but it was like away. He was kind of blocked from the student section, and they give the ball to the Dons the other way. Student section goes nuts. Digger says it's the right call, and I know it's the right call. He said, so I go over to the official or to the referee, and he said, and I am just screaming. I look like I'm screaming at him, and I don't recall the guy's name, but if it were you, he said something effective. Dan, what are you doing? Dan, do you see that woman in the second row? Yeah, she's really pretty, isn't she, Dan? Yeah, she is. All right, I thought so. And he looks like he's screaming and letting him have it. And he turns around, student section, give it to him, Digger. You tell him. Now the place is up for grabs. So
gets the best of both worlds.
Yeah, no, they have all the plays. Hey, before we take off here, I know you're involved in a million different projects and a lot of different things going on. Anything that struck you about the teams that we think will probably start the season in the top 10-ish, that might be a big cause for concern for you, something that they might have to overcome or question they might have to answer if they are in fact going to be as good as projected?
Well, I think they all have something, right? Does Penn State have anyone who can catch the ball? Right. Because, they certainly look good. Is Devonta Ross from Troy? Is that going to be the answer? And then I'll say this. I could go through all of them, I guess. But the number one question to me going into this season that's very interesting on a micro level. I felt like last year the macro level was, can you win a title with a plug and play quarterback? I thought that was one of the big answers. Could a Howard, could a Riley, and obviously they play in the championship game. So yes, which is not something that college football, I think, always believed. I think you thought you had to have a leader for 3-4 years. I think leadership transfers. If you bring in the right guy, they can be a leader. And you look at the guys that did that. But this one's a little more micro. How good is Arch Manning? I mean, this season it's rarely shaped on one player. Is such a huge figure in the build up to a season. It's really rare that person has never started or never been, he started a game, but he's never been the full-time starter. And, so you go back, I can't remember one quarterback having this much attention since, it's Tebow coming back. It's Johnny Manziel. It's this or that. Who's going to be it? And it's like everyone is sort of believe, all right, he's going to be great. Well, he's shown a lot of potential, and he's shown the ability to be really good, both running and passing. And there's certainly plenty of Texas fans I know you've heard from that, wish that he had been the starter last year. But it's mainly based on his last name. And if he's not named, or his first name too, really. So his name is not Arch Manning. It's like, oh yeah, Texas got they're loaded, but they got a new QB, but he looked pretty good. And so going into this season, that's my number one question is just how good is Arch Manning? If Arch Manning is everything that everyone kind of projects him out to be, that we now have the fourth great Manning quarterback, Texas is going to be impossible to beat. They're going to be really tough. But if he's just a normal guy, and by normal, I mean really good SEC level starting QB, where does that take us? And what if he struggles some? What is it? That to me is the single most interesting and uniquely interesting question. Every team goes into the season, you go, do they have a running game? Do they have this? Can the D-line hold up? Arch Manning is a unique storyline to this season to me.
Pete and I ranked our quarterbacks based on their college season coming up and what we expect. And I put Manning at the top of the list. Now, Pete immediately accused me of bias, because you may not know this, Pete does. Arch's grandfather is my favorite athlete of all time, and actually been delighted to get to know him and become friends with Archie.
Great guy.
Over the years. I haven't met Arch yet, but that is not the reason that I do believe he's going to be excellent. It is largely because I have unbelievable faith in Steve Sarkisian to take a quarterback where he is and accentuate every strength that he has. And I look no further than Mac Jones. Now, Mac Jones kind of gets killed in the NFL now. Mac was talented, probably not uber talented like Arch is, but he finished second in the Heisman Trophy balloting to his teammate. So he took a guy in Mac Jones, who most of us thought that, well, he won't hold the job. Bryce Young will beat him out as a freshman, at least by midseason, and almost won the Heisman.
Yeah.
So I think with Texas, I agree with you. That is the most compelling question going into the season. But I think the real key for Texas, and the question I have about them, is can they protect him and can they run the ball? Because their offensive line, they lost 4 guys, a couple of draft picks from last year, and I didn't think they were great on the offensive line last year. So, that's a bigger question to me about Texas. And when it comes to Penn State, I was looking back a little bit yesterday and refreshing my memory on Jim Knowles' first year in his system at Ohio State. Now, overall, they were good, but they gave up some big plays, and when they played elite offenses, it was even worse. They gave up, I think, 43 to Michigan. Then they gave up 42 in the 1-point loss to Georgia. They had some other, even in the Penn State game, in which, granted, his defense won with Tui Monolou making all of those great defensive plays and the pick six and everything. They also gave up big yards to Sean Clifford and big plays in that game. So for all of the expectations surrounding Penn State, will there be some growing pains on defense, particularly as you look for someone to at least somewhat offset the lost production from Abdul Carter? Will there be some growing pains there that might keep them from reaching their potential? And and there are so many others. You mentioned the transfer quarterbacks. Is Carson Beck healthy? Will it work? Can LSU win its opening game? LSU hasn't won the first game of the season since Joe Burrow's national championship year. It's not just a Brian Kelly problem. They lost the last couple of years after.
Yeah, they do have
that
too. They do start slow. Slow down at LSU. Well, you got to work out the morning. They're good late in Louisiana. Early mornings, not so good. No, I agree. Knowles is interesting. Certainly last year's defense was phenomenal.
And after they made some adjustments, they weren't so phenomenal at Oregon,
No, they weren't. But I go back to that first year when Michigan beat them down in the horseshoe. I mean, that defense was, I think they gave up 5 touchdowns over 40 yards. Mm-hmm. And I think even if you don't remember the game completely, I mean, there were 2 long runs by Cornelius Johnson catches, and then the 2 late ones by Donovan Edwards, where he just busts through the line and he's gone 75, 85 yards. Apologies to the Buckeye fans for even reminding them of that. But, I don't remember in the history of Ohio Stadium watching one guy run that many yards on 2 carries in a row. Mm-hmm. So that defense wasn't there. Is there that? So I agree there's going to be growing pains. I'm intrigued too, just to switch to a different team. Clemson. They've got the pieces, right? Klubnik's back. They've got a ton of guys back, and they famously have done this a little differently than other teams. All credit to Dabo Swinney. He's got his system. He's sticking with it. Can they be elite? Can they be a Final Four team? Can they win the national title the way they have done it? On paper, yes, and certainly through the ACC. Can they make that next step? I was at their playoff game against Texas last year, and they hung in there and they had their moments, but Texas there was a differentiating factor there in that game. Texas was the better team. Can they get back to being Clemson? And I think that's a pretty interesting sort of a more historical footnote or storyline to go with.
Yeah, a team from off the radar that might be a trendy pick to follow the Indiana path last year would be Illinois. I was in the Chicago area over the weekend, and Bielema, Altmaier, a couple of their other players, all over the local news. They had gone to Wrigley or whatever, and there were people talking Illinois football. And they won a lot of close games last year. I think they're 5-1 in one-possession games. You deserve a lot of credit for that. That shows grit, fortitude, all those things coaches like to talk about to win close games. Some of the close games were against lesser teams. One of them was against Purdue. So there are a couple of things with a team like Illinois, who I think has great potential. A lot of people back some, I think by some of the standards of evaluation of experience, the most experienced team in the country. Yet now they have some expectations, and you also have to follow up. Can you still win the close games, or have you improved to the level that those games that might? maybe should not have been close, won't be this time. I think they're pretty compelling, but I think handling some of the expectations and the attention that Bielema has brought to Illinois, and deservedly so, by the way, they're one of the teams that I'm watching and one of the things that I could see they could trip up on. But mostly it's quarterback, whether it's plug and play quarterback or the new quarterbacks at Notre Dame and at Michigan. That'll be a big factor of how good Michigan is. Alabama with new quarterback. Georgia, for all intents and purposes, with the new quarterback. Though I know Gunner started the playoff game against Notre Dame.
Ohio State.
Ohio State lost 14 draft picks. Really a lot of leaders on that team. Now, if I were going to do that, I would want to start with arguably the best offensive player, and I might even go a step further and say inarguably the best defensive player in the country with Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs, and neither of those might be arguable. So it's a good place to start, and certainly they have talent, but a lot of culture builders lost at Ohio State and the quarterback. So it's
what we've seen. What we've seen of late is certainly that type of group is what wins it. Okay, those Georgia teams were loaded with double-digit draft picks. And I always look too at combine invites, which I know is a little different metric, but you got to be pretty good to get to the combine. And you're talking 20-something guys getting invited to this combine. That's kind of your team. Michigan, same thing, right? 14 or so, I think, draft picks and 20-something combines, and then Ohio State. So you wonder, and then there's a fall off. And as much as you say, well, here's the high-end talent. Michigan had high-end talent last year. They had 3 first-rounders, I think, maybe 4, 3. But they had, obviously, Will Johnson fell out, I think.
Yeah, Will Johnson should have been, if not injured, he might have been. Yeah. And the 2 interior defensive linemen, which was they won the Ohio State game, Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant.
And Loveland, right? So they have 4 elite players, but then there's a step back. You don't have that just enormous things. I am not like an X and O guys. When I am at games, there's times when I just look out on a field, and I remember doing that with Michigan. I thought that with Texas last year when I saw them play the first time. You just look and you go, man, every guy out here is good. And there's just something. It's a pretty primitive way of looking at it. I should have a BCS computer ranking. How many guys are good, in my opinion, on first glance. That should be it. That, you just sit there, and that was Ohio State. They just said they're just players after player after player. So they're going to have that high end. But could Julian Sayin come in and be great? We don't know. Probably, maybe. Is there some growing pains? Is there, how do you do all that? And that's the beauty of the sport. There's such a churn these days. I agree with you in Illinois. Bielema's great at getting that team to this level. Can he take it to the next one as his bit? BYU is returning 1 million guys too. They're a team out of the Big 12 that could make some that I think could make some real noise and be very, very interesting on what they do. And Notre Dame has got a lot of good players. And they're bringing in CJ Carr will probably be their starter. We'll see. And so they're a little like Ohio State. They still have a lot of good players, and they're working the portal pretty well.
Probably the best pair of cornerbacks in the country at Notre Dame, and Leonard Moore, who was great as a freshman. Christian Gray, who made big plays for them last year. New defensive coordinator there. All of these things pretty fascinating to see how it fits together, and we're not even to the 4th of July. Like we talked about right off the top of the pod, we're getting to know each other. You a fireworks guy? What do you do on the 4th? What's your deal on the 4th?
On the 4th? We do have fireworks here in the city I live outside of Detroit. And
are you in? Oh no, you live outside of Detroit. That's like that area.
Fireworks
of the
every day.
Fireworks capital of the world around the 4th. It's like all over the place.
We like blowing things up. Around here. It's
are you a participant or an observer?
More this age, I think I'm more observer. No, I will not. No one wants me in charge of anything that could hurt anyone. I don't know. A little bush light on ice, and I'm pretty happy for 4th of July. That's how I say, God, happy birthday, America. So I keep it pretty simple.
How do they determine in the southeastern corner of Michigan, how do they determine which township has the right to do fireworks on a particular night? Because it seems to start about a week before the 4th and then just keeps going.
Yeah, there's one Thursday, and then the actual city of Detroit and Windsor, Ontario, they have a big one on the river because it's obviously a international border, and they shoot this. They have one early. Most of them are early, and so then by the time the 4th actually comes along, you've seen your share of fireworks without even trying. And then people are just shooting things off. Yeah, everyone gets a little crazy. It gets a little crazy. Long day, late sun, and people just lose their mind. Give them a reason, they're going to do it. So, and it's funny. The good fireworks are for sale in Ohio. They regulate very little in Michigan. So the trade-off was, if you want good fireworks, you have to go to Ohio, but then the people that wanted to buy legal marijuana, the Ohioans, had to come to Michigan. And I thought they should maybe just make a trade or something. I don't, not into politics, but I found that to be. So each way, they're finding their enjoyment, one way or the other. They're recreation. Ohio will let you buy better fireworks. So a lot of people making a run to Toledo right now.
I can't say it. Some of my closest friends in the world, people who've been instrumental in my life over the last 10, 12 years, make Toledo their home. So I have a great affinity for Toledo. Not much. Watch baseball, hang out, maybe cook something on the grill. Nothing. Not hardcore fireworks guy. Don't hate them. Don't love them. Disney World. I mean, you go to Disney World all these times and other fireworks show, unless kind of seem mundane. Mentioned a couple of times. My son plays, independent minor league baseball, and every Friday night's fireworks night at every minor league stadium in America. So you see a lot of them, and sometimes you almost forget the spectacle. Although I debated whether I would tell this story, and I'll close with this one. I was driving back to the Detroit airport on the 4th of July, I think 2 years ago, and there'd just been fireworks for days. And we go in and we go, wow, that's holy cow! This one just outside the city limits, or just inside the city limits. That's like, look at the blaze from the sky, and there were fireworks behind it. But as we got closer, apparently there had been some type of mishap, and there was like a massive fire in addition to the fireworks going on top of it. So be careful out there.
At the firework factory, I think there was, or
Is
something.
That what it was?
It was a warehouse that went up.
It was.
I think.
It was big. It was a big structure fire, that's for sure. Hopefully no one was hurt. So be careful out there if you're going to partake in the fireworks or partake in the other things that Dan mentioned, whether it's a bush light or whether you're going to the state of Ohio. Be particularly careful there. Dan, this has been fun. Great getting to know you a little bit. Thanks for coming on with us, and I look forward to having you on throughout the season, and awfully excited and thrilled to have you as a colleague here and the great work you'll continue to do for ESPN now. So thanks for listening to the College Game Day podcast. Download this wherever you prefer to get your podcast, or subscribe so you'll never miss a single issue. And if you are an assistant strength coach or maybe GA wanting to help the secondary staff, call Pete Thamel. He's got you.